As promised, questions and answers. I put out a request for a Q&A about, I think it's now, must be 2.5, 3 weeks ago. This is it. It's taken me a while to get to it, but however, here we are. I'll restrict the personal questions and concentrate on the channel and case questions. But however, there's a few personal questions. I will answer them. I'm happy enough to do that. I do believe in transparency, particularly on a channel on YouTube like this. I see so many channels and nobody has any clue who the person is behind it. So for the reason of transparency, I'll answer some of those personal questions. The questions have come through directly the channel in comments under videos. They've come through the community page, talk about that in a bit. They've come through the social media pages, my own Facebook personal page. So there's questions that have come all over the place. In this, there are questions asked. I've tried to paraphrase some questions. I've tried to amalgamate other questions where repeated questions were asked, or kind of the same kind of question but in different ways by different people. Tried to do that and answer those. Okay, let's just get on with it. Personal questions, channel questions, and then case specific questions I'll answer. I'm going to start with the personal questions. Going to keep this quite short because I want to move to the core channel and case specific questions. It was Anna C, and I asked quite a number of questions and I've kind of paraphrased them in. Would I ever return to Ireland? Why is she asking that? She knows I'm originally from Ireland. I've been here about 12 years. So would I ever return to Ireland? I've no immediate plans. We have myself and my wife here have our own house here. It's not a rented accommodation. The cost of living is a little bit better here in the Netherlands. The infrastructure is definitely very much better, and there's just a general better quality of life. Things like Medicare, just generally responsiveness, attention to detail, getting things done. I don't want to go into any more detail than that. Anna C also asked, what do I like about the Netherlands? Primarily coming from Ireland, where you ask a question of someone and you'll get a spiel of about 2 paragraphs before they actually get to answering the question. Anybody that's spent even very little time just touring on holiday in the Netherlands knows the Dutch are very direct and to the point. Some people even feel offended by that because I don't think Irish people, even UK people, are not used to that. There's a perception that Dutch people are extremely liberal and wild, and that to the very much a degree that's a complete myth. They are tolerant, but they expect everyone to respect their culture and traditions without making people feel outcast who are new here. The Netherlands is not unlike Ireland, Belgium and France, who are close to us here in the Netherlands. Modern and cosmopolitan on the surface in the big cities, but you get a better idea of Dutch people outside of those big cities. I don't live in a big city. I don't live in Amsterdam. I live about 20 kilometers north of Amsterdam, and you get a better idea of Dutch people. Dutch people they're very accommodating to new people. They do go out of their way to make them feel part of the community. Whether they speak Dutch or don't speak Dutch, Dutch people are very, very good at picking up whether you're an English speaker, and they'll switch immediately to English if they can accommodate. That can be more difficult with people in their 50 years of age, 60 years of age bracket, because their English mightn't be as proficient, but most young people, should we say, below the age of 50 are very proficient in the English language. But they'll be very quick to let you know when you've overstepped the mark. That's a whole nother ball game. Two other people also asked me about particularly because I haven't done direct interviews in, I'd say, about more than a year with the Radio Espial episodes. But up till then, I think, and I was reflecting on the guest vlogs and why they run so smoothly, even though I have a guest. And she was asking, do I have a practice run beforehand? That's not my style, no. Almost every interview you will see on the Radio Espial channel that I have ever done over the last, 2017, 2018, 6-7 years, almost every interview I've hosted is done as a recording, effectively live. It is a recording, but it's effectively live. Most were done via Skype, and there is little or no editing in post-production. I don't edit interviews that I do. They are literally what they are. My guests do get given very basic program note, bulletin point sheets about the general areas that we cover, but absolutely nothing is scripted. I do not give them, here's a list of questions I'm going to ask you so you can already be prepared. That's not the way I work. Every guest is fully briefed how I conduct an interview and the style I have. It's very free flowing. We fly very much as if we were doing the interview live. And yes, as you might imagine, it can be pretty intense and exhausting, those kind of interviews. Most of my guests are either well-versed public and media speakers. They're not fazed by radio or TV. But also to a T, most will later comment in feedback or directly to me privately that it was one of the most rewarding and different live interviews they've ever participated in. Primarily, I suppose, because I give a guest time. We build up to where we're going in an interview. And in an interview, you'll notice often at the start, before we get into the meat of the interview, I will often ask a guest to talk personally about themselves as an introduction. An awful lot of the guests that I've interviewed, I either have developed a relationship with them prior to doing the interview, and that might only be a few weeks, it might be a few months. I don't take on interviews easy. Hence, it's not easy to get willing guests because some guests are uncomfortable with that kind of approach that I do. It's a very different format than going on TV or radio and being interviewed by somebody that you don't know, and you're cold, you're blind, you don't know what you're going to be asked. Well, there's some of that in what I do, but because I develop a relationship and I reach out before I do the interview, the guests are much more comfortable, and I tend to find, as a journalist over many years, getting a guest very comfortable, and that guest already knows you over a number of weeks, a number of months prior, they're much more open in the interview. And many guests remark later that the impact the interview that I've carried out with them had on them personally and professionally. 70% of my guests I now count as good friends. So powerful was the experience for both of us. That's how I roll. Why each and every one is precious, and I'm honoured to have interviewed them. Whatever their life experience, tragedy, shared experience in precious minutes, over an hour or two of an interview, and I have no ending point for an interview. If it takes 1 hour, 4 hours, we've done it. And by Christ, I've done it. 1 hour to 4 hour interviews. And the guest has been delighted because we went that way. That's the way I roll with interviews. It's intense for us, me as a host, the interviewee, and it can be quite intense for the listener, the watcher. If it's not for you and you're not into that mad kind of thing, fair enough. There's other channels that'll do you. 5 minutes, there you go, off you go. Now, let's move on quickly. From the personal stuff to the channel stuff. Before I get into the deeper channel stuff, I'm regularly asked, and I get regularly asked this on the Radio Espial Facebook page. Yes, we're on Facebook page. There is a page there for Radio Espial. And I'm often asked, I don't know why, but maybe it's because I have such diverse interests and they all play into the Radio Espial channel. But I regularly get asked, what other YouTube channels do I follow? And I suppose like other pages, that kind of thing. But an awful lot of these would be developed from YouTube itself as my primary channel. It's easier to do this if I switch over to a shared screen for you. There we go, that's up. I'm not going to spend very long on this. The best way probably to view this is either pause or go to my YouTube Radio Espial channel and just click that button at the top menu on the homepage that says channels, and you'll be able to, at your leisure, click through the channels that I follow. I follow over 90 channels on YouTube, and needless to say, an awful lot of them are related to all the topics and subjects that I cover on Mick Rooney Radio Espial here on YouTube. So needless to say, no surprises here. Real crime. It's a 1.36 million subscriber channel. I'm subscribed there. Noel Phillips. Noel is a private pilot, now lives in the United States, originally from the UK. He does flight reviews. If you're into that kind of stuff, I know an awful lot of people are. He's one of the best channels out there for doing that. I am also very big into what is called a category of explorer or urbex, URBEX, and that is where people go to abandoned houses and investigate those abandoned houses, what they were about, what they look like, the people that live there, effectively time capsules. And I've quite a number of channels that I follow. One of them is the Bearded Explorer. He's also has an interest in one of the areas I have in vintage cars and car restoration. He also does partly that. He goes to abandoned houses that might have multiple car collections that are effectively abandoned along with the house. Adam Mark Explores is another major channel in that area. I also have an interest in, believe it or not, buses, cars and trucks when I was a kid growing up. This particular couple, their names escape me. They run a channel, Old Rope Salvage, 1.34k subscribers. They're currently, and for the last 2 years, have been doing up a Bedford truck, and with their idea of converting it into a sort of on-the-road movable caravan. If you're into that, it's fascinating. Needless to say, more mundane stuff. Nicola Tallant's Crime World, excellent channel. I think that's really only very much recently been that I've come across, has been launched. As some of you know, many of you may not know, I'm also both involved and interested in scams that are run that fool and catch people out, online scams in particular. So I've a lot of interest in that area. Pleasant Green will be one of those channels. Another one, totally off the wall, Wandering Turnip, fabulous channel. This guy, I think he's a healthcare and he's from the North Midlands of England. He travels up and down England, basically visiting derelict cities and towns who have experienced total industrial deprivation, where you can go there and buy a house for $5,000 or $10,000. It's completely in bits, and he explores that house with the market seller. He also explores, issues like the local pub disappearing from your local town, what has caused that. It's a deeply fascinating channel, well recommended. Also, tech support scams, Jim Browning from Northern Ireland. People will be very familiar with Jim Browning, one of the top channels on scams. Scammer Payback. Again, back to trucks, buses. Ned Kelly. I've always had a fascination with long distance truck driving and the life of a truck driver, both in Ireland, the UK, and those drivers travelling and their whole way of life to the continent. Ned Kelly, Ireland, fabulous in-depth channel. Ones you might be very familiar with, Todd Grande. We're into behaviour analysis that Todd Grande does. He does pick an awful lot of celebrity kind of style stuff, but he also picks deeper cases. Brothers of Decay, I think these are two Belgian or Dutch brothers. They also explore abandoned houses. Mr. Baldy Sensible, we're into the conspiracy theory debunking area. Mr. Baldy Sensible particularly got involved in that anti-flat earth nonsense that's developed over the past 10 years. I'm big into cooking. I love Asian food, particularly Indian food, Chinese food, Thai food. Food Review Club, I also follow an awful lot. Dot Blue, there's another channel, Heyman Food Reviews. Josh Cahill, more in the style of Noel Phillips, flight reviews, that kind of extended flight reviews. Wonderful guy. Mikey O, won't give his full name. Guy from Dublin, Malahide, and he does an awful lot of crime. His highlight is very specifically US crime. He does it in a very packaged way, but in a very good way. Cole Investigator, well, you should know that channel, and you should start to help build up that channel. At the moment, that's actually Kieran, my guest who joins me regularly for some of our cold cases and missing cases. That's Kieran's channel, The Cold Investigator. D&J projects, I'm big into DIY, that kind of stuff. I'm big into chess as well. So I follow a number of chess channels. More UK crime there, crime episodes. Dublin City Libraries, that's part of my local research that I do into the areas of Crumlin, Drimina, Walkinstown. There's sub playlists you can see for that. Primal Video, this is more to help me and guidance on helping me to build this channel to make it better for yous. Broken Window, that's another. Explorer, Urbex, Abandoned World Explorer, these are great. Actually, Abandoned World Explorer is doing a wonderful season at the moment. For the past month or two, he's been in Japan and is exploring Japanese abandoned buildings there, particularly what happened after the tsunami. Fascinating channel, lovely guy. Conor Moore Racing, that's to do with my Formula 1, bit of fun there and comedy. Atomic Shrink, I don't know how to describe Atomic Shrimp. He does a bit of everything. Cooking on a budget, foraging for mushrooms and food in the garden, in the forest, weird things in a tin. It's just, you just got to go to that channel and you can see it's almost at 1 million subscribers. Again, truly criminal. Some of the really better channels on true crime, Geisley K from South Africa with Grizzly True Crime, Red Tree Crime, Chris with the Interview Room, although my only aversion here is a bit of an obsession with just very specific cases and that alone. Trilogy Media, more into scam baiting, particularly US based scam baiters, where mules, financial mules, are used from India and Asia in the US, and they literally go to base and expose these people. That's Sean Phelan's site, the Haunted Area Collective. Again, give Sean many follows and subscribes and likes. More food, Rate My Takeaway, Danny's channel. You just go there if you're into takeaways being rated. Danny is a fabulous character, wonderful character. Air clips to do with my aviation. Sam and Jess, more explore stuff, true stories, more crime. Hubnut, more into the vintage cars and doing them up. This guy has a collection of about 12 cars he keeps in a lockup and just tinkers away with them through success and failure. Lena Trucker, self-explanatory, another who travels around the UK in her truck now. She's got her own truck now. Ocean Infinity, that's more to do with the MH370 case, and this is an exploration company with ships that goes and researches. It's a survey research company. Salvage Bills, more car vintage stuff. I think that's Chris, and can't remember the other guy's name. RA's Crime, Kid Boga, more scam baiting. Grey Hughes investigates. If you want kind of along the style of stuff that I do when I investigate true crime, and you want no bollocks, no messing around, crisp, clean, no entertaining conspiracy theories and nonsense and sticking to facts, Grey Hughes is your man. But you might struggle with his personality. He's very sharp and has no time for messers. Juan Brown, Aviation. Again, I'm just going to flick through these. Too Old and Too Slow. That's ironically an commercial aircraft pilot who later in life got into club motor racing and does that part-time as well when he's not flying you to your latest holiday destination. Mentor pilot, people will be very familiar with in the aviation area. Proper DIY, again, Stuart, who runs that channel, excellent advice on the simplest garden and home jobs. The Behaviour Channel, people would be very familiar with, well featured on Offra Winifred and other channels. Mark Weens, cooking. It Mel, I can take or leave It Mel with some of the, I'm not into car chases, but it's one of those channels that is very much developed through very particular cases like the Gabby Petito case and grown since then. Winging It with Paul Lucas, again, more aviation. But look, that's a quick snapshot. Let's get back to the channel specific questions. This is probably the biggest question I get asked. I get asked this once every second day. I get asked this, well, you only have such and such amount of subscribers, and that's because you don't do lives. I like lives.
This is typical. Absolutely typical.
I don't like lives. I don't do lives, and here's the reasons why. I don't think the case research content lends itself well to that format that I specifically deal with. With so many video news pieces, maps and images to juggle, as well as the timeline, it's a lot to deal with if you're literally going live on a channel, whether it's through Facebook or whether it's through YouTube. Lives tend to attract a far more casual kind of subscriber, even if you can persuade those casually joining subscribers. Lives to new subscriber conversion is extremely low, and believe me, I know it. Lives attract a significant amount of trolling, and they require a huge hands-on moderation that is really difficult to do when you're trying to run a live and you're running video inserts, you're running map inserts, you're trying to follow a detailed text timeline. It just doesn't work for me. And more to the point, and humbly, I don't actually think my channel is big enough to sustain lives. You know, maybe in the future I can see a value in lives for, you know, the subscriber community in 6 months time when the channel has grown. Maybe as like what we're doing here, a similar Q&A session where people can actually come on here live and ask me a live question, and we can talk about the channel. Maybe that kind of thing will work. But the actual core content I do, I don't think it works for. There's some successful true crime related channels that do lots of lives. I'd say 75% of their content, but not at the analytical level that I would present. I gave you a few examples when I flicked through the channels that I follow. Gray Hughes Investigates is probably one of those channels that does, you know, almost nightly, weekly lives. Geisler K with Grizzly Crime. In fact, the reason I did the true crime was because there was so much lives on cases which were becoming just daily ad nauseum videos, and virtually they were building their channel on a single case, whether it was Gabby Petito, the Madeleine McCann case, the Nicola Bully case is the more recent example of it. People literally built their channels on one case. Bonkers. Or the content was just too short. It was pre-recorded and very much packaged for passing audiences. It seemed more to me about sensational clicks and immediate views than any real substance to the channels. And as I say, we saw that with the Petito case and the Bully cases. Next question up. What is the difference between the Radio Espial specials and the Radio Espial episodes? I think it was Aoife C, can't remember her surname, who asked that of me on Facebook. It's a very simple answer, because people get confused. But, well, this is called a Radio Espial episode, and that's called a Radio Espial special. What's different? It's simple. The Radio Espial episodes, and they're numbered currently 1 to 33, we're about to go to 34, are my own content that I make. Specials are content I've selected but are not my own content that I'm allowed put up. That's the simple way I can explain that. There might be a documentary I think you're interested in about a case. That's the simple answer. Another big question I get: why don't you cover and do an episode on X case, insert X case name, or I get various iterations of that kind of question. The There's too many to list as an example, so I've chosen one. But just to touch upon the so-called cases I would be asked to do. Why haven't you done a case on Madeleine McCann? Why haven't you done a case on the John F. Kennedy shooting? Why haven't you done a case on Michael Jackson? Why haven't you done a case on the Yorkshire Ripper? One example I'll give you of that succinctly, that was asked specifically by a subscriber, was, can you do a similar case on prime suspect Ian Bailey, which was the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier in Ireland in 1996? And I think that was Brian McGinley who asked me that in a comment under another case. I'm trying to answer this as nicely and succinctly as I can, but getting to the point. Generally, I avoid celebrity cases, or those cases that have long established themselves as just a vehicle for trolls, cranks, attention seekers and conspiracy theorists online. I could spend months researching a case. I could bring in Kieran, he could do all his research, we could put everything together and produce something that lays out the facts of just one of these cases, no matter how long it's been going on. But I know if we chose particular kind of cases, some of them are referred to there, what we've just done will be completely and utterly fucking ignored. Why? Because instead, just another freeway and a roll of the dice for those with their own inbuilt fears, personal and mental issues, obsessions and hatred, a mistrust of any authority or science, deep-rooted biases, and a clown car they drive through your channel just to comment on those cases. Because they've heard John F. Kennedy, the shooting. It wasn't Harvey Oswald. I have a conspiracy theory. Bing! Michael Jackson. I remember the doctor, but I've other it was the CIA. Bing! Yorkshire. That's all nonsense. I know the guy who really carried out all those murders. Bing! Madeleine McCann. Oh, those parents, what did they do? You know, oh, I believe it's them. Oh no, I know it's someone. Bing! No. I ain't going there. I'm not interested. If you drive a clown car, you're into conspiracy theories, you have no interest in facts, and you have no real interest in what I actually put together, this ain't the channel for you. I'm not interested. That's why I don't cover some of those cases. Because it's just a beeline for people, a certain category of people who just spend their lives in their bedroom trolling YouTube channels, Facebook channels, and people like me just for their agenda, which is generally to do with hatred, wacko conspiracy theories. They're not interested in facts. I've no interest in that, and I've no interest in providing vehicles for those kind of people, even if they do own their own clown car. I hope I've answered that. Onward. Yet another case that seems to have been pushed to the side. I think this was Mick D in reference to cases that get more attention than other cases do. And I think another subscriber asked, why do some cases get more attention in the media? And particularly I think it's driven by the media and attention. These are really, I think Kieran and I discussed this in a previous episode. These are really difficult. It's difficult to put your finger on exactly the reason, and I think there are a number of reasons. And it's about the disparity of attention in cases. Case histories and how the media deal with the profile of a case can play a significant part, and I think very early on it plays a significant part. The reasons a case might be a cold case and it's gone on for years, and it's because there wasn't as much media attention at the time. This could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old. The Nora Sheehan case I put up, Like, that's got very little take-up. I did the case because I thought it was important. Because one, it was a very old case that has had resolution to it. But I knew this case wasn't going to get much attention. I knew it because, bluntly, Nora Sheenan was an elderly lady. It was a very old case. She wasn't the ideal, perfect case for the media. And let's be blunt about it. She might have been white, but she wasn't young, pretty, and successful. And in that syndrome that the media just absolutely love and host upon. And that's why we see that in high-profile cases like Madeleine McCann. That's why we see it in cases like Nicola Bulley. That's why we see it in cases like Gabby Petito. That's not any of those victims' faults. That's to do with the media and their obsession with the perfect case in their eyes and why they fixate on certain cases. You won't hear much talk about a Blackpool or Liverpool prostitute who goes missing. Oh, she was on the wrong side of life. Her life is just as important as any other woman who goes missing, or any other guy who goes missing. But just because people live on a certain side of life or have ups and downs doesn't mean that a homeless person that dies in the street or is assaulted and murdered in the street isn't as of the same value in investigation as somebody who comes from a middle class background, who's a successful real estate agent or businessman or businesswoman, and has the perfect 2 or 3 kids, and looks wonderful, and it's tragic they died in bad circumstances and we need to find out why. That homeless person who was murdered in the street, that prostitute who was murdered in the street, those cases are just as important because they have families and they have friends and people who knew them behind them. And that's the syndrome you get into when you involve the media with a case, particularly early on. Excuse me. They're either interested in it or they're not fucking interested in it. There are other aspects. Limited information released is also critical to keeping the public on board. The less information, the easier it leaves the mind of the public. Family involvement and proactiveness is another critical aspect. If the family are not heavily involved and reaching out in liaison with police, it's another aspect. At the age of a case, as I said, cold cases that maybe didn't have the media intensity at the time, it's very hard to get the kind of attention decades after. So the early status of a case also affects how often it will get replayed into the media, how often there will be reach outs, particularly on anniversaries. You need the family involved. You need that case to still remain a high profile. And of course there's circumstances. There's lack of evidence, knowing exactly what happened. Is this person missing? Did they go missing on their own volition? Was this person abducted? Do we even know whether this person was murdered? So there are a lot of aspects, but unfortunately at the top end of what I spoke about initially tends to play into an awful lot of these cases. I've also been asked, do you get feedback from families on cases? Do you work with them during a case episode? There's no quick way to. There's there's privacy reasons that I can't go too much into that. Basically, the answer is yes or no. It depends. It's less so with a cold case. I tend to find families, particularly parents, have passed away. Siblings are maybe quite elderly, are not in a position, maybe decades after, to promote the case of a missing sibling or a missing parent, or whoever the person is. Yes, I have had involvement with people both post to doing a case and previous to doing a case, where I let them know that I'm about to cover this case, but I tend to work privately on that aspect. I don't go much into it, and I prefer that. That's the better way, and generally I find that most relatives are more comfortable with that. Yeah, and I've experienced that right back to when I covered cases like MH17 and Malaysia, MH370. Malaysia Airlines had two planes that one was blown up over Ukraine, and the other that went missing in the southern Indian Ocean. And I met lots of relatives in those cases, and I've met relatives next of kin in more of the cases as well, and talk to them, and it just depends on how much they want to be involved with it, how supportive they want to be. But ultimately I prefer that remains private. They already have liaison police officers that they work directly with, and it's not up to me to interfere with anything that potentially, as far as a prosecution, could happen in the future. So I have to be very, very careful of what I might know, or any relationship I've developed with a relative in a case that I'm covering. It's just not an area I want to go into unless the relative very much wants me to speak about what we might have done. This is going into case specific. I'm trying to remember which case this is. Foreign cases of citizens' GPS tracking jurisdiction laws. This was from Mairead. I believe this was the Jean Toy case, the woman who went missing on the continent. I think it was Portugal. Praia, I think it was Portugal. A few years back. Yeah, look, I think the general point that Mairead was making is, yes, it's very difficult with an Irish or UK or American family dealing with situations that where a missing loved one has gone missing in another country. We saw that with the Nora Quiernan case. We've seen it with previously with the Madeleine McCann case. It is extremely difficult, and it requires an awful lot of diplomacy and embassies and foreign affairs offices working, and usually there are always problems because you're dealing with different jurisdictions and laws in countries that are dealt with and cases that are dealt with in different ways. Germany deals with a case in a different way than the Ireland and UK authorities would deal with it. Spain and Portugal have similar approaches to cases, and they tend to be much more confidential and do not do what you see in the UK and Ireland and make a big fuss or make an awful lot of PR media outreach. They tend to keep everything private until they are at the stage of making prosecutions, and that can mean years. I think as well the point Mairead was asking was, in that specific case with Jean Toy, are the police aware of GPS tracking of our phone that went missing? Are they aware of other activity on her social media? Well, guess what? Ask Louise and her sisters about their missing sister, and they'll tell you they're still trying to find out the answers to that. Did the police actually investigate and obtain that information? Because they haven't been told, or at least given any access. That doesn't mean the police did or didn't get that information, but if they did, by God, they're not sharing it with the family, and that is a really difficult situation for families to find themselves in, and many families find themselves in that situation. The Amy Fitzpatrick case is another one that comes to mind in Spain. I think the 15-year-old that went missing, as to, you know, what information was actually gathered at the time and how it was investigated. Fair Maiden, I think, and Lizzie also asked a similar question around that, about friends' witness statements. I often talk about witness statements and the value of witness statements in cases, both cold cases and current missing people cases. And yeah, the reality is those statements are taken when police interview somebody of interest. They might have information offered where they appeal for information, but unfortunately most of that information it can be leaked to the media, but more often than not, a lot of that information is held tightly by the police, and there's a reason why, and it's specifically because they do not want to tip off a potential suspect in the future, that they have more information on them and have suspicions about them until they are certain they can bring in that person and actually put them to the test and say, you weren't where you claim you say you were. It's that kind of thing. So police are very guarded about the information they release. It's what we call a need to know basis, and unfortunately when it's leaked it can actually be damaging to the case. I've done my best to answer that. I think that's enough questions now. Maybe we'll do this in another month, 2 months, 3 months time, but that's enough questions for now. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A session, and at least answered some of your questions about me, the channel, and very case specific questions, and why I do some things and cover some cases and do it the way I do it and not the way others do it, because that isn't always for me. I shall see you in a future Radio Espial episode. I'm hoping to have one up in the next 7 to 8 days. I'm hoping it'll be the Claire Boylan case. Listen, take care of yourselves. God bless. I'll see you soon.